In the remote village of Nyumbani, where the golden savanna met the lush green jungle, lived Asha, a woman whose heart harbored a desire as deep as the river winding through her people's land. At 35, Asha had experienced loss more times than she could count, but her spirit, like the river's waters, continued to flow with unbreakable strength. Every morning, before the sun kissed the treetops, Asha would rise and walk to the riverbank. There, with her feet in the cool waters, she would offer a prayer to the river goddess, the benevolent entity who, according to legend, watched over Nyumbani's prosperity. "Oh, great goddess," Asha whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmuring current, "I implore you, grant me the gift of motherhood. Let my often empty womb finally bear fruit." Years had passed, and with them, many hopes in the village. But Asha refused to give up. Her faith was as firm as the roots of the ancient baobabs that guarded the village. In Nyumbani, life followed the rhythm of the seasons. Men went out to hunt or fish in the river's generous waters, while women tended the fertile land and cared for the children. The elders, guardians of ancestral wisdom, spent their days under the shade of great trees, sharing stories and teachings with the young. Despite her pain, Asha participated in all village activities with a smile. She helped with the harvest, prepared communal meals, and sang during night celebrations. Her sweet, melodious voice stood out in the moonlit chants when the whole village gathered to thank the spirits for their blessings. But in the privacy of her hut, when night enveloped Nyumbani in its starry cloak, Asha allowed her tears to flow freely. Her husband Jabari, a man of few words but great heart, embraced her in silence, sharing her pain and hope. "One day, my love," he would say, tenderly caressing her face, "the spirits will hear our prayers." And so, night after night, Asha fell asleep with renewed hope, dreaming of the day she could hold her own child. Change came with the rainy season. The once brilliant blue sky became covered with heavy gray clouds. The air filled with an electrifying humidity, and the scent of wet earth flooded the village. It was during this time when the river swelled and life seemed to be reborn in every corner of Nyumbani that Asha felt the first hint of something different. At first, it was small details, a slight nausea upon rising, a sudden aversion to certain smells she had once enjoyed. But when her belly began to swell, the reality hit her like a thunderclap. She was pregnant. The news spread through Nyumbani like wildfire. The villagers, who had been silent witnesses to Asha's suffering for so many years, celebrated as if it were a miracle granted to the entire community. The older women surrounded her, offering advice and preparing infusions to strengthen the baby in her womb. Even the men, who typically kept their distance from such matters, approached Jabari to congratulate him and offer their best wishes. But no one was happier than Asha herself. Every day, she reverently caressed her growing belly, speaking to the baby inside, telling stories about the village, the river, and the benevolent goddess who had finally heard her prayers. As her pregnancy progressed, Asha began having strange dreams. In them, she saw herself standing in the middle of the river, water up to her waist. Around her, luminous figures danced on the water's surface, their laughter blending with the sound of the current. At the center of it all, a majestic figure with skin the color of the full moon and eyes that shone like stars smiled at her and extended its hands. Asha awoke from these dreams with a mix of awe and fear. Were they messages from the river goddess, or merely the product of her imagination, fueled by years of hope and longing? As her belly grew, so did the rumors in the village. Some said Asha's baby would be blessed with special powers. Others, more cautious, murmured that a birth so long awaited and surrounded by unusual circumstances could bring both blessings and challenges. The village elder, a woman as wrinkled as ancient tree bark, and with eyes that seemed to see beyond the visible, visited Asha one afternoon. With trembling but firm hands, She placed her palms on the expectant mother's belly and closed her eyes, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. "Asha," she finally said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "The river has blessed you, but also marked you. What grows in your womb is not ordinary. Prepare yourself, my daughter, for a destiny that will change not just your life, but that of all Nyumbani." The elder's words stayed with Asha, echoing in her mind during the long nights of waiting. What did that warning mean? Should she fear for her unborn child? But whenever doubt threatened to take hold of her heart, Asha felt a movement in her belly, as if her baby wanted to remind her that, no matter what the future held, a mother's love was the most powerful force of all. The night Asha went into labor, the sky over Nyumbani was lit with a shower of stars. The villagers, awakened by her cries of pain, came out of their huts to witness the celestial spectacle, interpreting it as a sign that something extraordinary was about to happen. Inside Asha's hut, the midwives worked tirelessly. The air was thick with tension and expectation. Jabari, unable to stay still, paced outside the hut, his eyes shifting between the starry sky and the entrance to his home. Hours passed, and Asha's cries intensified. The river, as if responding to her pain, began to churn, its normally calm waters turning into turbulent rapids. The village elders, gathered around a nearby fire, murmured prayers and enchantments, asking the spirits to protect Asha and her child. Just before dawn, when the last falling star crossed the sky, a baby's cry broke the night silence. But before the village could begin to celebrate, a second cry joined the first. Twins. Asha had given birth to 2 girls. When Jabari was finally allowed into the hut, he found his wife exhausted but radiant, holding 2 small bundles in her arms. The girls, identical in appearance, had skin the color of polished ebony and eyes that shone with an inner light, as if they had captured the glow of the stars that had announced their arrival. "Akia," Asha whispered, looking at the girl in her right arm. "And Zuri," she added, turning her gaze to the left. The names had come to her like a whisper on the wind, as if the river itself had chosen them. The news of the twins' birth spread quickly through Nyumbani. The villagers, amazed and emotional, gathered around Asha and Jabari's hut, eager to glimpse the newborns. Many brought gifts, hand-woven blankets, protective amulets, and food for the new mother. But while most celebrated, some watched with caution. The village elder, in particular, looked at the twins with a mix of awe and concern. Her eyes, clouded by age but still sharp in perception, seemed to see something others could not. "These girls," she murmured to herself, "will bring both blessings and challenges to our village. The river has claimed what is its own." The days following the birth were a whirlwind of activity. Asha, slowly recovering from the delivery, marveled at the perfection of her daughters. Though they were identical in appearance, it soon became evident that they had distinct personalities. Akia, the older by a few minutes, was restless and curious, her small hands always reaching for and touching everything within her grasp. Zuri, on the other hand, was more serene, observing the world with large, contemplative eyes. Jabari, initially overwhelmed by the responsibility of fathering twins, soon found himself completely in love with his daughters. He spent hours sitting beside their crib, telling them stories about Nyumbani's great warriors and wise men, promising them a future full of adventures and discoveries. But during the ceremony to present the girls to the village, the first incident occurred that made everyone aware that Akia and Zuri were not ordinary children. The ceremony, an ancestral tradition in Nyumbani, was held at the riverbank. Parents presented their newborns to the river goddess, asking for her blessing and protection. Following custom, Asha and Jabari waded into the shallow waters, holding Akia and Zuri in their arms. As the village shaman recited the traditional prayers, the water around Asha and Jabari began to ripple strangely, as if stirred by an invisible current. Suddenly, small droplets of water rose into the air, dancing around the twins like liquid fireflies. The villagers, amazed, stepped back, some in fear, others in reverence. Akia laughed, her tiny hands trying to catch the dancing droplets, while Zuri watched them with an unusual serenity for a baby. The phenomenon lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to sow unease in many hearts. That night, as the village buzzed with rumors and speculation, Asha and Jabari sat silently by their daughter's crib. The elders' words echoed in their minds. The river has claimed what is its own. What does all this mean, Jabari? Asha whispered, her voice barely audible. What future awaits our daughters? Jabari, looking at the sleeping twins, replied with a mix of determination and fear. I don't know, my love, but whatever happens, we will protect and love them. They are our miracle, our gift from the river, and together, we will face whatever destiny holds for us. As the night advanced, the river sang its eternal song, as if whispering secrets only Akia and Zuri could understand. In Nyumbani, a new era had begun, and no one could predict the changes it would bring. Years passed, and Akia and Zuri grew, filling Nyumbani with their laughter and mischief. As they developed, it became increasingly evident that the twins were not like the other village children. Their connection to the river and the natural elements manifested in subtle but undeniable ways. Akia, the more extroverted of the two, discovered early on that she could make small drops of water float in the air with just a gesture. At first, this fascinated the other children, who crowded around her, asking to see her trick. But soon, some parents began to keep their children away, fearing Akia's influence might be dangerous or contagious. Zuri, on the other hand, seemed to have a gift for communicating with plants and animals. She was often found sitting quietly at the edge of the forest, surrounded by small animals that seemed to listen attentively as she whispered to them. Plants seemed to grow faster and stronger in places Zuri frequented, and soon, the gardens around Asha and Jabari's hut became the most lush in the village. Asha watched her daughters with a mix of pride and concern. She saw the beauty and potential in their gifts, but was also aware of the wary glances some villagers directed their way. Jabari, ever protective, ensured the girls were never alone, fearing someone might try to harm them out of fear or ignorance. As Akia and Zuri grew, their personalities became even more defined. Akia was brave and adventurous, always seeking new ways to explore and expand her abilities. Zuri, on the other hand, was reflective and compassionate, using her gifts to help others whenever she could. One day, when the twins were 6 years old, an incident occurred that changed the village's perception of them. A severe drought had hit the region, and Nyumbani's crops were on the brink of destruction. The villagers prayed desperately to the river goddess, but the sky remained clear, and the river's bed dwindled day by day. Akia and Zuri, hearing the adults' concerns, decided they needed to do something. One night, while everyone slept, they slipped out of their hut and headed to the nearly dry riverbed. Zuri, do you think we can help? Akia asked, her eyes shining with determination in the darkness. Zuri nodded solemnly. We must try. The river will hear us. The twins held hands and closed their eyes, concentrating intensely. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then, slowly, the air began to fill with moisture. Clouds started to form in the previously clear sky, and a gentle murmur, like water flowing over stones, began to grow. Suddenly, with a roar that woke the entire village, the sky opened up and rain began to fall in torrents. The villagers came out of their huts, amazed and confused, to find Akia and Zuri standing in the midst of the reborn river, laughing and dancing under the rain. This event marked a turning point in the twins' lives and in the village's attitude towards them. Many who had previously feared them now saw them as a blessing, a gift from the river goddess to protect and guide Nyumbani. However, some became even more cautious, fearing the extent of the girls' powers. Asha and Jabari, aware that their daughters would need guidance to handle their gifts, sought the help of the village elder, known for her wisdom and connection to the spiritual world. The elder, named Nana Adwoa, agreed to take the twins under her tutelage. "These gifts are powerful," she told Asha and Jabari, "but also dangerous if not handled wisely. I will teach the girls to understand and respect the balance of nature." So began a new phase in Akia and Zuri's lives. Every afternoon, after helping their parents with daily chores, the twins would go to Nana Adwoa's hut on the edge of the village. There, surrounded by dried herbs, mysterious amulets, and the constant bubbling of potions in preparation, the girls learned the ancient secrets of their land. Nana Adwoa taught them about the delicate balance between the elements, the importance of respecting natural cycles, and the responsibility that came with their gifts. "Power without wisdom is like a river without a bed," she often said. "It can create or destroy without discernment." As Akia and Zuri grew and learned, their powers became more controlled and refined. Akia could now manipulate large amounts of water, creating intricate shapes in the air or directing the river's flow to help irrigate the fields. Zuri had developed the ability to accelerate plant growth, ensuring abundant harvests even in difficult seasons. However, with the growth of their abilities, challenges also grew. Some in the village, led by a man named Kwesi, began to see the twins as a threat to the natural order. Kwesi, an ambitious man fearful of the unknown, argued that the girls had too much power to be mere humans. "What will happen when they grow up?" he murmured to anyone who would listen. "Who will be able to control them if they decide to use their powers against us?" These voices of dissent, though in the minority, began to create a division in Nyumbani. The village, once united, was now split between those who saw Akia and Zuri as a blessing and those who feared them. Asha and Jabari did everything they could to protect their daughters from these conflicts, but it was impossible to shield them completely. Akia, with her passionate nature, often confronted those who spoke ill of them, while Zuri became more introverted, spending long hours in the forest, finding solace in the company of plants and animals. One night, when the twins were 10 years old, Asha found them sitting by the riverbank, their faces illuminated by the moonlight. "Mom, why do some people hate us? We just want to help," Akia said, her voice trembling. Zuri, always the more perceptive, added, "I can feel their fear, Mom. It's like a shadow that grows every day." Asha sat between her daughters, hugging them tightly. "Fear comes from ignorance, my little ones. Some fear what they don't understand, but you must continue being who you are, using your gifts for good. In time, even the most fearful will see the beauty in what you can do." But even as she spoke these words of comfort, Asha felt a growing unease in her heart. She knew the coming years would bring even greater challenges for her daughters, and wondered if Nyumbani would ever fully accept them. What Asha didn't know was that Akia and Zuri's destiny was intertwined with forces beyond her understanding, and soon they would face trials that would test not only their powers, but also their love and loyalty to their family and village. As Akia and Zuri approached adolescence, their powers continued to grow and evolve in unexpected ways. The village of Nyumbani had largely become accustomed to the presence of the magical twins, but there were still moments that left everyone amazed and, at times, fearful. One hot afternoon when the twins were 12, an incident occurred that would mark a turning point in the village's life. Akia and Zuri were helping with the harvest, along with other children and adults from Nyumbani. The sun shone intensely, and the air was thick with humidity, making the work especially exhausting. Noticing the fatigue on the villagers' faces, Akia had an idea. Concentrating intensely, she extended her hands to the sky. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then, to everyone's astonishment, small droplets of water began to form in the air, growing until they became a gentle drizzle that refreshed the workers. The villagers, grateful for the relief, began to laugh and dance under Akia's magical reign. However, the joy was short-lived. Kwesi, the man who had always distrusted the twins, shouted in fury, "This is an abomination. They are playing God." His words sowed chaos. Some villagers recoiled in fear, while others defended the twins. Amid the confusion, Zuri, trying to calm the situation, touched the ground with her hands. Immediately, the plants around her began to grow at a dizzying speed, forming a protective barrier around her and her sister. This demonstration of power only served to increase fear and confusion. Kwesi and his followers began to shout that the twins were a threat to the village and should be expelled. Asha and Jabari ran to their daughters, trying to protect them from the increasingly agitated crowd. It was then that Nana Adwoa, the wise elder, intervened. With a voice that resonated with surprising authority for someone of her age, she shouted, "Silence!" The crowd calmed instantly, surprised by the elder's strength. "Is this how we honor the gifts of the river goddess?" continued Nana Adwoa. "These girls are a blessing, not a curse. Their powers are meant to protect and nurture Nyumbani, not destroy it." Her words seemed to have a calming effect on most, but Kwesi was not satisfied. "And if their powers turn against us, who will stop them then?" Nana Adwoa looked directly at Kwesi, her eyes shining with ancient wisdom. "Fear, Kwesi, is a poison that corrodes the soul. These girls have grown up among us, laughed with our children, cried our losses. They are as much a part of Nyumbani as you or I." Then, addressing the entire village, she continued, "It's true that Akia and Zuri's powers are great and can be fearsome, but they are also beautiful and necessary. The river blessed us with their presence for a reason. It is our duty to guide and support them, not fear or reject them." Her words seemed to resonate in many villagers' hearts. Slowly, the tension began to dissipate. Akia and Zuri, still protected by the plant barrier, looked around with a mix of fear and hope. That night, a village meeting was called. The elders, led by Nana Adwoa, discussed long and exhaustively about the future of the twins and Nyumbani. Finally, a decision was reached. Akia and Zuri would continue living in the village, but their training would be intensified. Nana Adwoa committed to teaching them not only to control their powers, but also to understand the responsibility that came with them. Moreover, it was decided that the twins would participate more actively in village life, using their gifts to help with daily tasks. In this way, it was hoped that everyone in Nyumbani could see and appreciate the value of their abilities. For Akia and Zuri, this decision marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. They were no longer simply the magical girls of Nyumbani. Now they were apprentice guardians, with the responsibility of protecting and nurturing their people and land. The following years were of intense learning and growth. Under Nana Adwoa's guidance, the twins deepened their understanding of the natural magic flowing through them. They learned to meditate, connect with the spirits of the earth and water, and channel their powers in increasingly refined and controlled ways. Akia, with her affinity for water, learned to control not only rain, but also to purify contaminated waters and sense underground currents. Her abilities became invaluable during dry seasons, ensuring that crops were never without water. Zuri, on the other hand, developed an astonishing mastery over flora. She could accelerate plant growth, heal sick trees, and communicate with vegetation in ways no one else could understand. Under her care, the forests around Nyumbani flourished, attracting more wildlife and providing an abundance of fruits and medicinal herbs. However, despite these advances and growing acceptance from the village, the twins often felt different, set apart. There were times when they wished to be like the other children, free from the enormous weight they felt on their shoulders. One night, shortly before their 14th birthday, Akia and Zuri escaped from the village and went to their favorite spot by the river. Sitting on the bank, with their feet in the cool water, they shared their deepest thoughts. "Sometimes I wish we could be normal," sighed Akia, looking at her reflection in the water. that we could worry about simple things, like the other kids in the village. Zuri nodded, understanding her sister's feelings perfectly. I know. Sometimes I feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. But then I think about all the good things we can do, how we can help our people, and I feel grateful for our gifts. Akia smiled faintly. You're right. It's just that sometimes I wonder if we will ever truly be accepted, if we will ever have a normal life. As the twins shared their concerns, they didn't notice that someone was watching them from the shadows. Kweshi, who had never abandoned his distrust of the girls, had followed them that night. Hearing their words, an idea began to form in his mind, an idea that would have devastating consequences for the entire village. The following days passed with apparent normalcy in Nyumbani. Akia and Zuri continued their training under Nana Adwoa's guidance while helping with the village's daily tasks. However, a shadow loomed over them, a threat they could not yet perceive. Kweshi, consumed by fear and resentment, had begun meeting secretly with a small group of villagers who shared his concerns. Among them was Jelani, a young hunter known for his skill with traps and knowledge of poisons. The twins are too powerful, Kweshi whispered in these clandestine meetings. If they continue to grow in power, who knows what they could do? We must act before it's too late. Jelani, influenced by Kweshi's words, suggested a terrible plan. I know of a rare plant that grows deep in the forest. Its sap, when mixed correctly, can suppress magical abilities if we can make the twins ingest it. The idea took root in Kweshi's mind and that of his followers. They decided to act during the next full moon ceremony, an important event in Nyumbani, where the entire village gathered to celebrate and thank the spirits. Meanwhile, unaware of the plot against them, Akia and Zuri prepared for the ceremony with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This would be the first major ritual in which they would participate actively, using their powers to bless the crops and ask for the spirits' protection for the village. The night of the ceremony arrived, and the village gathered around a large bonfire in the center of Nyumbani. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of burning herbs. Nana Adwoa began the ritual, her voice resonating in the night as she invoked the ancestral spirits. When the time came, Akia and Zuri stepped forward. With grace and concentration, they began to weave their magic. Akia made the nearby river water rise into the air, forming brilliant patterns that danced in the moonlight. Zuri, in turn, made the plants around the ceremonial circle bloom, filling the air with sweet and comforting fragrances. The villagers watched in amazement. Even those who had expressed doubt seemed captivated by the beauty of the spectacle. However, in the shadows, Kweshi and Jelani waited for their opportunity. When the ceremony reached its climax, a ritual cup was passed from hand to hand. Each villager took a sip, symbolizing the community's unity. When the cup reached Kweshi, he discreetly poured in the poison Jelani had prepared. Asha, who was nearby, noticed a strange gleam in Kweshi's eyes, but before she could react, the cup had already reached Akia and Zuri's hands. The twins, suspecting nothing, drank the contaminated liquid. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The ceremony continued, and the twins completed their part of the ritual. But as they were about to return to their place next to their parents, Akia suddenly staggered. Her eyes widened in horror as she tried to summon water, and nothing happened. "Zuri," she whispered with a trembling voice, "something's wrong. I can't feel the river." Zuri, attempting to use her own powers, found she too could not connect with the plants around her. Panic began to grip them. Asha and Jabari ran to their daughters, aware that something terrible was happening. Nana Adwoa, sensing the disturbance in the energy flow, approached quickly. "What have you done to them?" Asha cried, holding her trembling daughters. Kweshi, seeing his plan had worked, stepped forward. "We freed the village from the threat of their powers," he declared, his voice a mix of triumph and fear. The revelation caused an uproar among the villagers. Some screamed in horror, others seemed relieved, and a few applauded Kweshi's action. Nana Adwoa, barely containing her fury, faced Kweshi. "Foolish ignorant, do you have any idea what you've done? The twins' powers are not a curse to be eliminated, but a sacred gift from the river goddess. By suppressing them, you have disrupted the natural balance." As if to confirm her words, the ground began to tremble slightly. The river, which had always flowed peacefully, started to churn and grow, its waters becoming dark and turbulent. "The river is angry," Zuri whispered, her face pale with fear and pain. "I can feel it, even without my powers. Something terrible is going to happen." Akia, recovering from the initial shock, looked at Kweshi with a mix of pain and disappointment. "Why? We only wanted to help, to protect the village." Kweshi, facing the consequences of his actions, began to realize the mistake he had made. I just wanted things to go back to the way they were," he stammered, fear replacing his previous confidence. But it was too late for regrets. The river, like an enraged beast, began to overflow. The waters, normally clear and life-giving, now seemed dark and threatening. "Everyone to higher ground!" Jabari shouted, taking charge amid the chaos. As the villagers ran for safety, Asha and Nana Adwoa stayed with the twins, desperately trying to find a way to reverse the effects of the poison. "We must take them to the river," said Nana Adwoa urgently. "It is their source of power. Maybe it can purify them." Without wasting time, Asha and Jabari carried their daughters to the edge of the raging river. The water churned violently, as if seeking something or someone. "River goddess!" Nana Adwoa cried over the roar of the waters. "These girls are yours. Do not let the poison of ignorance and fear take them from you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, a giant wave rose from the river, enveloping Akia and Zuri. Asha screamed, trying to reach her daughters, but Jabari held her tightly. When the water receded, Akia and Zuri lay unconscious on the bank. But something had changed. Akia's hair, once black as night, now had blue highlights like the deepest water of the river. Zuri's skin had a faint green tint, like that of young spring leaves. Slowly, the twins opened their eyes. Akia was the first to speak, her voice sounding strangely melodious, like a murmuring brook. "The river goddess spoke to us," Zuri nodded, her eyes shining with an inner light. "She showed us our true purpose." Nana Adwoa, watching the girls in awe, understood what had happened. The goddess has fully claimed them. They are no longer just girls with powers. They are living avatars of the river and the earth. Asha and Jabari looked at their daughters with a mix of love, pride, and fear. They knew nothing would ever be the same. Akia and Zuri's destiny, and with it that of all Nyumbani, had been sealed that night under the full moon. Meanwhile, the river began to calm, slowly returning to its normal course. But everyone in Nyumbani knew that a new era had begun, one where the power of nature and the village's destiny were inextricably linked to two young girls who were no longer entirely human. The days following the ceremony incident were of great commotion in Nyumbani. The village, already divided by the presence of the twins, now found itself in a state of even greater confusion and fear. Akia and Zuri, transformed by their encounter with the river goddess, had become even more enigmatic and powerful. Asha and Jabari, worried about their daughter's safety and the village's reaction, decided to keep the twins at home during the first days. Nana Adwoa visited constantly, trying to understand and guide the girls in their new condition. "Their powers have evolved beyond what I ever imagined," the elder explained to the concerned parents. "They are no longer simply girls with magical abilities. They are direct channels of the river goddess's will and the earth." Akia, whose control over water had become almost absolute, spent hours sitting by the river. her eyes closed, as if in constant communion with the water's flow. When she spoke, her voice had a musical timbre, like the sound of a clear stream. Zuri, on the other hand, seemed to have developed an even deeper connection with nature. Plants grew and flourished at her touch, and forest animals approached her without fear, recognizing in her a primordial force of life. Meanwhile, in the village, opinions were divided. Many, led by Kwesi, argued that the twins had become too powerful and posed a threat to Nyumbani's traditional way of life. Others, impressed by the river goddess's direct intervention, saw Akia and Zuri as living blessings capable of bringing prosperity and protection to the village. A week after the incident, a village meeting was called to decide the twins' fate. Tension was palpable as the villagers gathered around the great baobab tree at Nyumbani's center. Asha and Jabari presented themselves with Akia and Zuri. The twins' appearance caused a murmur of amazement among the crowd. Their transformation was evident. Akia seemed to emanate an aura of freshness and vitality, while Zuri radiated a sense of peace and growth. Nana Adwoa spoke first. "People of Nyumbani," she began, her voice laden with authority. "We are at a crucial moment in our history. The forces of nature, embodied in these young girls, have chosen us for a greater purpose. We must decide whether to embrace this gift or reject it out of fear of the unknown." Kwesi, still consumed by guilt and fear, stepped forward. "Gift? How can we be sure this is not a curse? These creatures are no longer human. How can we trust they won't destroy us?" His words provoked murmurs of agreement among some villagers, but also looks of disapproval from others. Then Akia spoke, her voice resonating with wisdom beyond her years. "We understand your fear," she said, looking directly at Kwesi. "Change is always frightening, but I assure you, our love for Nyumbani, for all of you, has not changed. We are, and always will be, part of this village." Zuri nodded, adding in a soft but firm voice, "Our powers are not to dominate, but to protect and nurture. The river goddess has shown us visions of what Nyumbani could be if we work together in harmony with nature." Their words seemed to have a calming effect on the crowd. Even those who had expressed doubts seemed to reconsider their stance. Jabari, seeing an opportunity, stepped forward. "I have lived my entire life in this village," he began, his voice full of emotion. "I have seen droughts that almost destroyed us, and floods that threatened to sweep away everything we love. But never, in all these years, have I seen a blessing as great as the one before us. My daughters, Akia and Zuri, are a bridge between us and the forces of nature. With their guidance, Nyumbani could flourish like never before." Jabari's words resonated in the hearts of many villagers. Asha, inspired by her husband's courage, also raised her voice. "I know some of you fear the unknown. I am afraid sometimes too. But I have seen the love and compassion in my daughters' eyes. Their power is great, yes, but their hearts are even greater. Give them the chance to show us the way to a better future." A reflective silence fell over the assembly. Then, slowly, one of the village elders, a man respected for his wisdom, rose. "I have lived many seasons," he began, his voice rough but firm. "I have seen changes I thought would destroy our way of life. But Nyumbani has always survived, always adapted. Perhaps this is the greatest change we face, but it could also be our greatest opportunity. I propose we give Akia and Zuri the chance to guide us, to show us how to live in true harmony with the land and the river that sustain us." His words seemed to break the last barrier of resistance. One by one, the villagers began to nod in agreement. Even Kwesi, though still visibly uncomfortable, bowed his head in acceptance. Nana Adwoa, seeing the tide had turned, proposed a solution. "Let Akia and Zuri stay with us, not as mere members of the village, but as our spiritual guides. Let us allow them to show us how to use their gifts for the benefit of all. In return, we commit to protecting and supporting them in their new role." The proposal was met with a general murmur of approval. Akia and Zuri, moved by their people's acceptance, stepped forward, holding hands. "We promise to honor your trust," said Akia, her voice blending with the sound of the nearby river. "We will use our gifts to protect and nurture Nyumbani," Zuri added, her voice as soft as a spring breeze. "Together, we will create a future where the village and nature thrive in perfect harmony." With these words, a new era began for Nyumbani. The following days and weeks were of adjustment and learning. Akia and Zuri, guided by Nana Adwoa, began to explore the full extent of their new powers. Akia discovered she could not only control water, but also purify it and even change its state. Under her influence, the village's irrigation system became more efficient than ever. During droughts, she could extract moisture from the air itself, ensuring crops were never without water. Zuri, in turn, transformed Nyumbani's surroundings into a true green paradise. Under her care, crops were more abundant, medicinal plants more potent, and the forest richer in life and resources. Her connection with animals also proved invaluable, helping hunters find prey more efficiently and sustainably. But not everything was easy. The twins, now in the peak of adolescence, sometimes struggled with the weight of their responsibility. There were nights when Asha found them silently crying, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their task. "Sometimes I miss just being a normal girl," Akia confessed one night, her voice breaking with emotion. Zuri nodded, adding, "It's like every decision we make could affect the whole village, the whole nature around us. It's scary sometimes." Asha hugged them tightly, her heart torn between pride for her daughter's strength and the pain for the childhood they had lost. "You will never be alone," she assured them. "The whole village is with you, and your father and I will always be here to support you." As time passed, Akia and Zuri's influence extended beyond Nyumbani's borders. Travelers from other villages began to arrive, drawn by rumors of the magical twins and the prosperity they had brought to their people. Some came seeking healing, others for advice, and some simply to see with their own eyes the miracle they had heard about. Akia and Zuri received everyone with grace and compassion, sharing their gifts and wisdom. However, with fame came new challenges. Not all visitors had pure intentions. Some tried to exploit the twins' powers for their own benefit, and others saw them as a threat to ancient traditions. One day, a group of armed men from a rival village attempted to kidnap Akia and Zuri, believing they could use their powers to dominate the region. But they underestimated the girls' strength and Nyumbani's loyalty. Akia, sensing the danger, summoned a dense fog that disoriented the attackers. Zuri, communicating with the forest animals, guided them to distract and confuse the intruders. The villagers, led by Jabari and Kwesi, who had found redemption in protecting the twins he once feared, surrounded and captured the aggressors. This incident served as a reminder of the importance of unity and vigilance. It also demonstrated how much Nyumbani had changed. The village, once divided by fear and distrust, was now united in its determination to protect its precious guardians. As Akia and Zuri matured, so did their understanding of their role in the grand scheme of things. They were no longer simply the magical girls of Nyumbani, but the guardians of a delicate balance between the human and natural worlds. One night, while the village celebrated the harvest festival, Akia and Zuri stood before their people. Their figures, illuminated by moonlight and the bonfire's glow, seemed almost ethereal. "People of Nyumbani," began Akia, her voice blending with the nearby river's murmur, "we have come a long way together. We have faced fears, overcome challenges, and learned to embrace the unknown." Zuri continued, her voice soft but full of power. But our journey is just beginning. The world is changing, and we must change with it. Nyumbani has the potential to be a beacon of hope, an example of how humans and nature can coexist in perfect harmony. The twins extended their hands, and before the villagers' amazed eyes, they created a vision. In the air above the bonfire appeared images of a possible future, Nyumbani expanding, but in harmony with the surrounding forest. Fertile fields producing abundant crops without depleting the soil. The river, clean and vibrant, providing life to the entire region. "This is the future we can create together," said Akia. "A future where respect for nature and human progress go hand in hand," added Zuri. "But we cannot do this alone," they concluded in unison. "We need each of you to be part of this dream." The vision disappeared, leaving the village in an awed silence. Then, slowly, applause began. It grew into a roar of approval and commitment. Asha and Jabari, watching from the side, looked at each other with tears in their eyes. Their little girls had become visionary leaders, guardians of a better future. As the celebration continued, Akia and Zuri withdrew a bit, standing by the riverbank. Looking at the flowing water, a symbol of constant change and eternal continuity, the twins reflected on their journey. "Do you think we'll succeed?" Zuri asked, her voice just a whisper. Akia took her sister's hand. "Together, with our people, I believe we can achieve anything." And so, under the starry sky, with the sound of celebration behind them and the eternal murmur of the river before them, Akia and Zuri prepared for the next chapter of their extraordinary life. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and possibilities, but they were ready to face it, guiding Nyumbani towards a new era of harmony and hope.